let's just spend a few moments on just getting the mind centered. I think just set an intention of what you'd like to achieve. It's not that you'll achieve it. I mean, set an intention of how you would like these 2 hours of mental imprints to ripen. Maybe you could put it that way. Okay? So 2 hours of mental imprints, just think, okay, for once I'm going to motivate or intend it to ripen in a particular way. You know, some things that people think about are, for example, just on a very temporary level, you could think these imprints will ripen to prevent my own mind from entering a depressed state. You can think like that. Then you can think these imprints generated not only for my own mind to not enter a depressed state, but then I can help other people who have depression, struggle with depression. You can think like that. And then you can think, okay, not just depression, but many emotional, mental disorder, emotional suffering, emotional pain, disturbance. My mind to be prevented from these simple 2 hours of imprints, and then to use that, or also to help others to be alleviated, relieved from their emotional difficulties. And then finally to think not just emotional difficulties, but, complete clarity of mind, complete clarity, alleviation of any imprints that lead to any level of dissatisfaction, unhappiness, unenlightenment, we could say. Okay? That's a big stretch. Okay. So what is the difference, do you think, if we think about interventions of depression, for in sort of conventional psychology and Buddhist psychology? I mean, even though I'm going to talk about, what is your thinking about, why is there delineation? What's the delineation? Is that the right word? Delineation? Yeah.
Are you asking what the difference is? Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Western psychology doesn't view reality the way the Buddhist psychology.
Okay, I'll repeat what you're saying, but I forgot I have to do that, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that Western psychology doesn't view reality, they view it different than Buddhist thought, psychology, philosophy, yeah? Mm-hmm. Then?
And so, I guess the whole thrust of Western psychology is that you accept the conditions that have occurred without really understanding that you've created those.
Sorry, Piers. Western psychology, it seems to you that you sort of accept the conditions that arise for you, as opposed to
understanding in that you are the
as opposed to understanding that oneself is the creator of those. Okay, yeah, that helps. No, sorry, I have to go in order.
Oh, I was going to say something similar, but also in just a generalized term, Western psychology, puts generally a title on it, a name on it. Here's what it is.
So in general, Western psychology puts a particular label on it.
It's a label.
Yeah?
And I think that when you look at it more from the Buddhist perspective, It's not a label.
So from the Buddhist perspective, it's not a label. We'll talk about that if I get through all my slides, which I never do, but I'm going to really push. Okay, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, it's not, I don't feel like it's labeled.
It's labeled, or, yeah, okay. I would say, to jump ahead to the 33rd slide, no, that it's labeled differently, maybe. Or the relationship to the label itself is different.
I would agree with that, the relationship.
You had,
I think that I'm not familiar with all the lineages of Western psychology.
Neither am
but
I, yeah.
It seems that very frequently the emphasis is placed on the external factors, like miserable childhood, alcoholic parents,
miserable childhood, alcoholic parents,
being
external
molested as a child, abused in school.
abuse in school, sexual abuse as a child.
Not that all of these things should be disregarded,
Not that, yeah. Not
then
that
years
right.
are spent in incessant analysis.
Say that again.
Years are spent in
Years are spent in incessant analysis.
analysis and rehashing of those, coming back to those problems over and over and over.
Yeah, revisiting the problem over and over
Revisiting,
again.
yeah. And there is no relief sometimes.
Sometimes there's no relief. So I think I mentioned in this series, I don't know when, a conversation I had with Zoen Rinpoche. I know I did. And I was being kind of critical of Western modern therapy because I said, it's often called talk therapy. There's many therapies, it's not, but I would say the general therapeutic approach is talk therapy. There's behavior therapy, there are all kinds of it. And I said, so because things like, let's just say depression or mental problems are mental, they're not form. Right? But we talked about this is really interesting. So they're formless. So talking, is form. Sound is form. So I said to him, it doesn't make sense that you would use an approach that was not aligned with the nature of the problem. But he got me. I thought, it was a true concern of mine. He said, yeah, but when you talk, you think. So that also had a positive effect for me because of my times, what the approach to modern therapy for me that was most attractive was narrative therapy. And that is a lot about how you have conversations about the problems. So in fact, the narrative therapists or constructivists don't have any relationship to Buddhists, but I look at this and go, wow, that's really aligned with Buddhist thinking, although it's very shallow compared to the Buddhists, but doesn't matter. It gives you a language, a model to speak from. So in narrative therapy, they say the problem exists in the language of it, the labeling. Okay? So in traditional narrative therapy, if you just go watch a traditional narrative therapist, whatever that is, and you watch his or her conversations with a client, they're extremely different. Because the idea is, so example is, let's say that in typically what you were saying, modern psychology, the labels, we talked about this, when did you get depressed? How long have you been depressed? Why are you depressed? What do you do when you're depressed? In other words, and then it gets deeper, right? I mean, you start talking and then, and so what happens is in that conversation, it's not intentional, is that depression becomes a thing, a self-existent, we say, self-existent or independent object, right? So in fact, from a Buddhist point of view, you're actually making the problem worse. Maybe not temporarily. We have to be understanding. I mean, there's some, like people who are really clinically depressed, severely depressed, you can't do this kind of talking with them. You have to, you have to get them out of that depth. They don't, there's clinical depression, a very, very deep suffering experience. So we're sometimes talking, like the question last time about was I talking about, I don't remember what the distinction was, circumstantial depression or something like that, or, that's a valid question because these ideas, remember I told you what Lama Yeshe said? I don't know if I can't remember if I told you along. She said about the time one woman was breaking all these windows at the monastery. Remember? And what was his response? Take her to the hospital. We're in the middle of a monastery. A couple of enlightened beings there. All these 85 monks and geshis, and take her to the hospital. She needs a psychiatrist. So we have to be respectful. So I think we're talking, when I tend to talk, I'm not talking about that level. That level, we have to go to, talk to a professional psychologist, therapist who, understands the clinical relationship. We have to respect that level. But we're talking about kind of more the human functioning level, where you're still functioning. That's what we're talking about now. Okay? So if I see depression as something that doesn't exist the way it appears, as something almost, what we say is empty of existing that way, it's like conditioned, and there's all these things about it, then why not have conversations that help the person think like that? That's where I would hope modern therapy would go. Narrative therapists and others, brief therapy, but particularly the constructivists are called, have a kind of a hook on that. They're pursuing it. I don't know if it's getting any deeper than I was saying this, 20 years ago, so I'm not really up to date. But okay. So now I got to go 34 slides, and how much time? So one of the other jobs that I have done, not so much anymore, but I used to work also with organizations because coaching I was in the coaching field before it was popular. Someone asked me if I did coaching. It was a Silicon Valley startup. And I said, well, what do you mean? I didn't want to say no. He said, do you help executive teams? And I thought, okay, executive team must be like a family. I was a systemic thinker. I think systemically. I don't think like you're saying, this family systems model, or or alcoholic model, or psychodynamic model, or object relations model. It's all these. But I was more like systemic. Things are just systems. So I guess it's another system. So in my process of doing that work, I found, maybe people know, but there's a school of organizational development called Appreciative inquiry. Have you heard of that? Great. If you could just get time, even whether you're interested in doing that, or it's very interested in their philosophy. It's very connected with constructivism and narrative. It's called Appreciative inquiry. One of the things I won't get into it because it's a separate class, but it's very interesting philosophy. They work with organizations. So one of the things they say is if you look for negativity, you find lots of it. So when you look for depression, you will find lots of it. Margaret, you didn't know you were depressed, right?
That's right.
Yeah. We could make you depressed. How's your job going? Yeah. You know what I mean? You watch conversations. We have to be super careful. The conversations in the media and the politics amongst it. So we should be. The point is we need to pay attention to the effects. So when we talk about things that are problematic, we have to be careful about the effects of it. So in Appreciative inquiry, they found the effects of talking about negative things in the workplace or an organization made more of them. It didn't make more of them, but everyone's sort of shining a light on them. And it's like, yeah, we do have. One of their cases, I remember, was about they were asked. There was a company that was dealing with sexual harassment. This was years ago, so it'd be relevant now too. Company dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace, and so they brought in a consulting firm. I don't remember which one it was, and the consulting firm worked with them, 6-8 months, and the reports of sexual harassment went up. Right? Makes sense. So then the Appreciative inquiry, the company was not happy with what was going on, and they talked to the Appreciative. So appreciative inquiry people, the one thing I have about this, they won't talk about the problem at all. I think because they don't have, there's a way to talk about problems where you don't reify them. There is a way. That's another class someday. But you have to have some kind of, you take skill. But their approach is just talking about the problem makes it more real. Okay? So what they doing in the workplace, they started interviewing people around the sexual, the gender and sexual respect in the workplace. They knew there was this problem. But the more they talked about that, and that was the dialogue, then you wanted to create more of it. So they started talking about, how do we create more of that? How do we create a culture of respect? And of course, like all good stories, things got better a lot. That's their other thing they say. Organizations, and I think people too, move in the direction in which they have conversations. So in the appreciative inquiry work, they start having the conversations that the organization decide. You have to work with the organization. Well, what is it you want to become? So they have things like in that case, it was, a workplace that's respectful of, gender and sexual differences, for example. That's interesting. So then you have, when it says conversations, of course, conversation doesn't just mean talking, right? It means what your publications, your meetings, all kinds of things. So then what do you want to create as a respectful environment? Then you start having conversations about what is a respectful environment, what creates a respectful environment. When have you noticed that this environment has been respectful, okay? Why am I telling you this, by the way? Margaret, how long have you been depressed?
40 years?
40 years.
Let's say 10.
10 years she's been depressed. That must be really hard. Yeah. How does it affect other people around you?
It just brings everybody down. It's like that gray cloud over, is it Linus or some?
Yeah. Who was that? Had the gray clouds? Huh?
Pigpen.
Pigpen, right. That's really interesting. So anyone that goes near you, what happens to them? Do they get more depressed too? Or
Yeah.
do they want to be around you? Do you find people like not calling you as much?
But that was kind of the problem before anyway.
They weren't calling, so you got more depressed. Yeah. So the more we talk about it, the more it becomes a depressed experience. Not that you maybe will get more depressed, but you might get more depressed. But all we've done is reified that. All we've done is made it more existent. And now if I say, well, it's interesting. Try this experiment. It's really tough to do, but I want you to do it. So you meet up with someone who's like that, saturated, we call it. Problem saturated. They're dripping. So Margaret is dripping with her depression. And so if I say to Margaret something like, well, when was last time someone called you? Or when was last time you went out with someone? She says, oh, no, never. I never go out with anybody. Never. Okay, well, when was last time? Well, it's not never. A few months ago, this guy called me. I didn't really like him, but we went out. Yeah, where'd you go? We had dinner. How was it? Yeah, it was okay, It was okay. Do you know what I mean? People, so you do have people calling you. Yeah, but that was just once. Oh, it's the only one. So you have to listen. So you're listening to recreate, right? We have to become different listeners. That's a dharma practice. That's a Buddhist practice. Okay? So now with depression, you're going to start listening for things that are anti-depression. And your friend is going to want to only talk about the depression. How his girlfriend left him. She cheated on him when he went away on a business trip to make money so that they could buy a house together, right? And you have to have the courage to be respectful and sympathetic, but that's not where the solution is going to be coming from. Okay? So did you say there was a question?
There were questions, but not anymore.
What were they?
No, it was more comments about kind of what the differences between what.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
Okay.
Sorry, because I have to be respectful.
Yeah, sure. One person had said the premise is different,
The premise between the two therapies or psychology is different.
and the other one said take a pill and make it better versus internal resilience.
Yeah. Take a pill and make it better versus internal resiliency. Okay, that's where we're headed tonight. I'm on the third slide. Why don't you make me go faster?
It's so juicy.
You're going to be here all night at this rate. Okay.
Maybe January.
Okay. Okay, now my slide's not shifting. Why isn't it? I think my... Oh, there we go. Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, so this supports it. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche, as you know, is the head of this organization, many of our main teachers, main guru. If we focus strongly on one fault that we have, the thought of that fault will overwhelm any thought of our good qualities, so that we will see ourselves as having only faults. Our good qualities will become invisible, and we'll see ourselves as hopeless. What's a synonym for hopeless? Depression. Think about that. It's so profound. We can't just let that go. If we're Western, well, we all are helpers, right? Especially if you're a Western psychologist or therapist, how can you read that and then move on? Won't you kind of question, well, what is it that I'm doing then? Again, not to dismiss all that people are doing. I don't mean that. It's really more of a mindset. Okay? It's a mindset that we have to train ourselves in. And this is counterintuitive, isn't it? In our culture. By the way, this is kind of culture bound. You don't find, in many cultures, they don't. I remember Lama Yeshe and even His Holiness Dalai Lama commenting how shocked they were to find this thing about low self-esteem. What is it? They want to know, what is this low self-esteem thing? Remember that California had the self-esteem movement? What was it? Self-esteem? It was something that California, what do you call it? Representatives. It was a political legal bill that was passed to have self-esteem. Does anyone remember this? I'm not articulating it very well. I read that and go, are you kidding me? It lasted like 2 years, but it was, someone they passed a bill in the California legislature to mandate programs for kids you remember? In self-esteem. Yeah. What happened to it?
Was a success and
everyone's got good self-esteem. I mean, in a way, you can't criticize it because if they'd done it the right way, I'm supposed to, probably. But that's a very hard thing to do the right way. So anyway, they didn't know what self-esteem. The other one that in Tibetan culture that they find very fascinating is guilt. There's no word for guilt in Tibetan. There's regret. And regret is considered a neutral emotion. Neutral means, it's not really neutral, variable. Because regret can be a positive emotion or it can be a negative emotion. I think the negative emotion of regret is actually guilt. But we use regret as a way of purification. We have to have, you have to regret we all do bad things or we wouldn't be here. And so the idea is, you have regret for that. And that's fine. But guilt is a useless emotion. So if you think about depression and you really, really work with your own depression, because we all get depressed, I think, on some level. And people who are really depressed, they have a pretty negative dialogue going on, don't they? We'll go see. So that's what Rinpoche said. Our good qualities will become invisible and we will see ourselves as hopeless. Is there a comment? No? Okay. So here we go into the more Buddhist approach. So we're making a little shift now. Clinging is the problem that arises from ignorance or not knowing. That's what you said earlier, right? And someday you're going to teach me, why does this thing happen? And it doesn't go away. It'll come back, sorry. So clinging, think about that. think about clinging. With depression. So, what our general problem is we cling to the impermanent as if it's permanent. We cling to what is not really pleasurable, but we think it is. And we hold on to it. Okay? We preserve it, extend it. Okay? The unreal is real, and uncertainty is certain. So what would be an example of, can someone give me a real live example of a depressed attitude? Like what, or a friend you know, or a person who's depressed, what do they say? What are they depressed about? Or just what do you think people might be depressed about?
Something they don't have.
Well, a real example.
Loss.
A real example. Loss of what?
Loss of job, loss of spouse, money, health.
Those are pretty real, huh? Loss of job, money, health, spouse.
Youth.
Youth. How about one? Give me one. I think of someone who's, it's hard, it's always hard when we're in the laboratory here and then you says, think of an example and your mind goes blank.
Loss of hope.
I want you to tell me, do you know someone who's depressed?
Yeah.
Okay, he or she?
She.
She. What does she talk to you about?
Well, her son has addictions.
Her son has addictions.
He's an alcoholic.
He's an alcoholic.
She's been supporting him for a long time.
She's been supporting him one time.
At the same time, she's refusing to seek for any solution.
She doesn't seek any solutions, so she just stays hopeless.
Oh well, it is what it is.
Yes. So any one of these, if we look at it, any one of these, you think about impermanence versus permanence. It seems a little brutal to say that if she, when she sees her son, this is really interesting, going kind of deeper. When she sees him as a permanent entity addict. That takes over her consciousness and her perception, isn't it? But he's not. He's also impermanent. There's things changing moment to moment. But you can't see, people go, oh yeah, it changes from addict this minute to addict next minute. That's a very different way of answering it. You're still seeing permanence. When you see something moving and changing instant, you can't put the label on something. How do you pin a label on the smoke? Smoke's moving, or a cloud. You can't, can you? You can't take your pin and put it on there. That's what all this reality, that's one of its qualities. Almost all of this that we experience is moving, but we don't see it that way, right? Another thing for you. This we'll go on because it gets a bit brutal. So with her seeing her son, actually, when we deal with reality, I'm going to everything is in the nature of suffering. Actually, so her own son, and we're not putting him down. There's not really. I mean, it's a bad thing to deal with, but the depression part. Why depression? It's interesting. Why depression? Why not action? Why not contentment? Why not resignation, but a kind of acceptance that's active acceptance, right? Not complacency. Why depression? So she's clinging to something. What is she clinging to? We're just hypothesizing.
To an idea of
of
being healthy.
Him being healthy and a functioning young man. What she doesn't see, unfortunately, like all of us, is all these other factors happening, aren't there? I mean, of course we want the best for everybody. Someone asked Lama Yeshe, said, how do we stay happy in light of all the suffering in the world? How do we, shouldn't we feel sad? That's what something. Shouldn't we feel sad? And he thought it was this really strange question. So sad, you can say depressed, right? He thought it's a totally irrelevant question, he thought. Because he said to feel sad at other people's suffering is just emotional. It's just emotional. If you feel sympathy, you don't have to feel sad. And that your job is to be happy first as well. You have to, you're never going to be happy because everything's in the nature of suffering. So you're saying you can never be happy if you see other people suffering? He says that's not the right answer. The right answer is to be happier, because then you can be of service to them. It's an interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? Okay. Did you have something, Margaret?
Yes, I just need to refresh the screen.
Okay.
So it gets frozen. So someone had, actually, one person with 2 comments said, the feeling is the depression is nothing's going to work out.
Depression is that nothing is going to work out.
And you grasp
Hopelessness.
That's right, and you grasp onto the hopelessness.
And you grasp onto the hopelessness. That's right. So nothing's going to work out, which is interesting. You're grabbing on to certainty, the last one, right? It's certain. This is forever. No wonder you'd feel depressed. It's not certain. And it's not permanent. Both of those apply with this comment the person made. When you see reality, when we see reality, we see things as impermanent. We see things as completely uncertain. But that's not our normal waking mode of experience, is it? When you go to your car after this, you're going to the car with certainty, aren't you? And then when things are uncertain, we go, wow, what happened? They're so oh, these cars are terrible. Whoever would buy one of these? Or whatever, right? Okay. So remember this. This is clinging to, in particular, these 4 are very important in Buddhist psychology. These are what we cling to. And they're opposite of reality. Conventional reality. And reality. Okay? Why do we do that? You don't have to answer that. That's the problem. Okay. Being tricked by what? You know that's just a drawing, right? There's no water there. There's no... It's a sidewalk art. That's how we see things. We think they're really there. There's something there. There's something there, right? But it's not water running down the street. Okay? This is a good metaphor, a good analogy for a way we see. Right now you're seeing me like this. I'm seeing you like that. Isn't that weird? Yes.
So this is a little long by somebody saying, my strongest attachment is sexual, which has caused me great suffering in the past.
My strongest attachment is sexual, which has caused me great suffering in the past.
This craving tricks my mind into desiring a romantic relationship.
This craving tricks my mind into craving romantic relationships.
With someone who doesn't want a relationship with me.
With someone who doesn't want a relationship with me. That's difficult.
I currently find myself reliving this situation, but I'm lucid enough to not give in or act out.
I'm currently
reliving
the situation.
But now lucid enough to not give in or act out.
To not give in or act out. Good.
This attachment has a very strong hold on me despite realizing its delusional effect.
Despite realizing its delusional effect. I hear you.
Is there a karmic explanation for this?
Oh, yeah. Is there a karmic explanation for this?
And what are the ways to purify this negative karma?
What are the ways to purify this negative karma? Okay, so that's a great question, big question.
Two more sentences.
Well, then can I do that one first? Yeah, because I can't. We have to finish tonight, right? What was the first question?
That's a good question. Is there a karmic explanation?
Yeah, is there a karmic explanation for this? So, yes, definitely. In fact, that is the explanation for this. So, two things about karma in this case, or in this example. First of all, we don't believe in karma. And then intellectually we might begin to believe in karma, but then we don't actually believe in an experiential way, because it's a very hidden phenomenon. It's called a very hidden phenomena. So it's hard. You have to accept it on faith for a long time, and then you can then accept it intellectually and analytically. That's great. So faith and analytically, it's a while before it's experiential. In fact, we have to have very deep awareness through meditation to actually experience karma. Impermanence is different. Impermanence is just a subtle phenomenon, not a very subtle phenomenon. Okay, so meditators can experience impermanence actually easier and prior to experiencing cause and effect. So karma means cause and effect, mostly mental cause and effect. We were talking about, so a lot of people say, well, that doesn't make sense because, I didn't do anything, create those imprints in this life very much. I didn't watch pornography, and I didn't, it doesn't make sense that I have such intense craving, for sex. It doesn't make sense. I mean, a little bit I did, or blah, 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 right? That's the limitation of not understanding karma. So the person asked about karma. So to understand karma, then pretty soon you can't accept or believe in karma without accepting and believing in past and future lives. So you were mentioning about genetics. We were talking earlier about the eye, molecular degeneration being maybe genetic. And I almost made the comment then, well, then there's what I call, I don't know if anyone's ever, anyway, I call it mental genetics. So mental genetics, to me, is karma. So the mind is being formless. It moves life to life. That's what moves, and it carries these imprints, these genes, these mental genes. And even those mental genes do get sort of reflected upon the physical genes. Not entirely, because there's much more karmic mental genes than there are physical genes. Even though we have how many chromosomes? Well, how many? It doesn't matter. A lot of genetic properties, right? I don't know enough about it. But anyway, so to this person's question, it's having planted these imprints on your consciousness that are ripening now. And the good news is you're aware of them. The bad news is you're aware of them. It's annoying. It's annoying. It's agitating, but it's impermanent. So just like depression, hopefully we'll get there in the interventions, is you have, the trick is not to create new ones, if you can. And that maybe just has to stop by not doing particular sexual actions. Not having sex, I'm not talking about that. Like pornography or, many kinds of things that make those deep imprints. And now they're ripening for the person, but the fact they're ripening is not a big deal because they would anyway. So then the opportunity is purification. So the purification, for one thing, is as they ripen, they're purified. It's popcorn. Once it pops, it doesn't pop again. You can't put it back in the kernel. It's annoying. You don't know how many are there. How big is that bag of popcorn? We don't know. We don't know. That's the bad part, difficult part. Now, in terms of purification, I would say the other thing you can do, and this goes back to one of our interventions later, which I'll present now. One of the things to do, the most powerful thing is when you are experiencing, I don't know if it's with women or men, it doesn't matter, this sexual attraction is seeing the thing as beautiful, for one thing, right? That's start there, or as attractive. So without talking about emptiness or reality, which is the real way to purify it, start by just doing analysis. And it takes time, and to stick with it, that you analyze whether the object really is attractive. Okay? And then begin to see it as unattractive. And you have to do some mental gymnastics with that. Okay, it's a trick. I mean, it's a device. So a lot of people say, well, how do you do that? I mean, I look at this woman or whatever, she's so beautiful, this is perfect, this is perfect. So it's all this, you have to see that you're creating that. Then you should study a little bit on emptiness and try and find where's the beauty or handsomeness in that person. You can't find it. Do it over and over and over again until you're really convinced that you're right, I can't find it. But that's the deep one. That purifies. But on a more surface level, spend time meditating on the unattractiveness of it. And in Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, has a great description of it. So, for example, real quickly, because this is a lot of people struggle with, and we all struggle with this one, is if let's just say, you can't tell if that was a man or a woman, can you? Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So one of the things is when you look at the person, this gets kind of gross. But actually, what is a person? So when it's this kind of question, we're talking about either she or we're attracted to the person's body or the personality, right? Okay. So first of all, in terms of the body, you have to get in touch with the reality. The reality is the body's pretty disgusting. Shantideva, I understand this from Shantideva. He says, what's the big deal about kissing? If someone spits, right? No one wants to touch that spit. But yet, when it's in their mouth, it's okay. And then in terms of, all the things like caressing and all this stuff, he said, but, if you just cut it a little bit, or if you took, like the thing you're attracted to in that man or in that woman, let's just say, oh, I just love her face. She's so beautiful. Then you do things like, well, what if you just took the face, cut the head off, put it there? You're not attracted to it. So then you say, oh, no, it's the whole thing. Then you go, well, this is Shantideva. It's not me making this up. This is the whole thing. I see. So put the whole thing there, the body, a man or woman, as a dead person. That's right. It's corpses there, right? It's the whole thing. No one wants to touch that. In fact, you run away afraid. Then they say, well, then it's the mind. No, it's the mind. Well, if it's the mind, what are you so attracted to her body for, or his body? And then in terms of personality, it's the same thing. What we do is we over-exaggerate these qualities. Over-exaggerate. We project onto, okay, so the guy is nice. Let's see, he's friendly. He's smart. So we project onto this absolute smartness, absolute friendliness, right? And we don't even notice that the other things about his personality, for one thing. And also the friendliness. Well, that friendliness is probably full of attachment. I mean, just if he's an ordinary person. If it's a holy being, then that's a different story. But we'll talk about just as an ordinary person, okay? The personality. So that personality is something that's moving moment to moment. So which part of the personality you attracted to? Oh, the one he's showing up right now, so friendly. That's gone. Oh no, then this friend, that's gone. How about when he's angry? How about when he's arrogant? How about when he's condescending? How about, oh no, I don't like those, but he's really friendly a lot. He's got a good sense of humor. Yeah? Do you like it when he yells at people driving over Highway 17? I mean, it's just so exaggerated. It's not that people are all bad. We're not saying, but that thing, that one little thing, isn't it? I want to marry him because he's said this joke, right? That's what we do. I want to marry him because he was funny last night. He's so beautiful. Whew. And then you don't say, and also, by the way, we have to pay attention to, that, you all know, because we all have partners or have had partners, whatever, that doesn't stay the same. The person says, I haven't changed. Why don't you love me anymore? Because that projection on top of, that thing that she or he did on top of that person, it fades because it's not permanent. Okay, if it was permanent, everyone would see him as funny, right? Or smart. So the thing is, it's not existing from its side, and we get tricked. That's what the trick is. You have to see it existing from that side in order to be attached to it. If you see it not existing from its own side, but as an interplay with your own consciousness and many other factors, where do you get attached? What part? How do you find the part to get attached to? Right? What's the other part of the question?
I think you kind of answered it. It was,
Okay.
She asked, what is a healthy...
I hope that's helpful for the person. Yeah.
What is a healthy way to develop a relationship with that person of attachment?
Yeah.
And it's...
What's a healthy way to develop a relationship with that person of attachment?
And lastly, I'm often tempted to tell the person to F off.
I'm often tempted to tell the person to F off. Because, the last part, as a way of protecting herself? Okay. Maybe that's what it means. What was the first one was?
What is a healthy way to develop a relationship with that person of attachment?
What is a healthy way to develop a relationship with the person? Well, with the person of attachment, that person of attachment. I think we have to be reasonable, right? We're not Arya beings, well, at least, no. Some people maybe, I shouldn't say that. If you haven't realized emptiness, and you're a lay person, it's reasonable to think you'll be in a relationship with people. We are in relationships anyway, all day long. And those relations, every single one of them are an interplay, are, what's the word? Are, influenced by attachment. Every single one. So the problem, I think, is when we're trying to be with somebody in a relationship, the attachment seems to be bigger and stronger, right? I think that I personally believe that relationships, if we want to attain, like awakening or some high level of development, I think relationships are kind of the way to go. I know people won't agree with me on that, but it means having a spiritual partner that has similar values as you do. And then what the relationship means is, so to this particular person, I would say, you have to check up that the person has a similar set of values as you and is willing to, the biggest thing in a spiritual relationship versus non-spiritual is a spiritual relationship. It's like this. I'm responsible for my crap. I'm responsible for my enlightenment. You are not there to take care of me, of all my needs. I'm not there to take care of your needs. So I'm here, I'm going to use you, the relationship, to develop my strengths, my courages, my compassion, my patience, work with my insecurities, work that. And that's what your job. And do you agree that's your job? And if the person says yes, then that's a spiritual relationship. But then there's a little caveat. There's an asterisk. But I'm not there yet. So when I get angry at you, for example, I know it's my anger. but I might need your help. Maybe don't turn on the television so loud when I'm trying to do my practices. I know it's my problem. Don't leave the milk out all night. I got pissed off about that. Maybe, can you help? So one way I can do is not get angry. It's true. It's my problem. Maybe you can help me a little bit by trying to put the milk away. But you're not holding the person responsible for your anger and your attachment. That's the big thing. But you're in a relationship, so you collaborate. Okay? Another one?
Another one. Another comment, question someone had. And what does it mean to not exist from its own side?
What does it mean to not exist from its own side? Well, let's hope okay, that gives me impetus to get to that 31st slide. Okay, so let's go, just think about these things. And if I don't get to it, remind me of that, Margaret. Okay. So here's depression. Okay, here's what happens. Really think, it's very simple. We are disappointed at not getting what we want. It's really simple. Or getting what I don't like, or what I don't want. And then there's also the thing you mentioned, loss. Loss in a way is number 2. We get something we don't want. I don't want, him to leave my life. Whatever. Okay. I don't want to lose my baby boy, and now he's a drug addict. It's also going to be not getting what we don't want. So this happens all day long. This is life. Okay? This is what happens. This happens all the time. Now, sometimes a certain event transitions into depression or unhappiness. Right? So the trick here is that we're getting duped into thinking things are permanent. Remember 2 slides ago. Okay? Or another way of saying it, we're getting tricked by thinking, I'll never get what I don't want. That's kind of how we walk around, isn't it? When we come, like going into the supermarket and there's, I keep going to these different markets. I go to Whole Foods and Nob Hill and this other place. I keep trying to get Yorkshire Gold black tea. Anyone use that? It's the best black tea. Yeah. Yorkshire Gold. When I say best, see, it's truly the best. If you have, someone British or Australian in your family, then you'll have some Yorkshire Gold. So that's a little hint about my family. Meaning, so I've been going in and what? I'm not getting what I want, right? I'm not getting what I like. What happens to the mind? The mind does shake. It does move, right? If you become very aware, you realize your mind is moved. When you see that space on the shelf. Now we're talking about a subtle level, and we're all getting there, right? We're all watching, we're getting better at watching our minds. But when it's something like, this happened with a client. My wife told me that when she was traveling, she had a fling. Ooh. That's getting something you don't want. Okay? Simple as that. So could that lead to depression? Right. Definitely. Okay, because then it starts what happens is I'm not going to go there. Okay, I'll go there. So I'm going to do this fast. So these are these trivial, they're usually referred as the 8 worldly dharmas. So when we're involved I shouldn't have written it this way. I'll try and paraphrase for you. We spend our life in these 8. That's the point. This is the meaning of life. The meaning of life means trying to fulfill pleasure. Trying to have as much pleasure as we can. That's happiness for most. And then not encountering that which is unpleasant. Think about that, just those 2. Think about your day. Think about when you get in your car. You go home. For example, just something simple. It starts raining. It's night. Lights are bright. Your wipers are old. It's unpleasant. Or you're going to have to teach me how to get rid of this thing. This is... Oh, come on. See, it does this. It's really unpleasant. Another thing is, so we spend our, this is where the mind becomes, okay, so the mind can become depressed. This is what I want to say. Not just this is a typical, this is not an unusual teaching about the eight worldly, these trivial pursuits. But think about depression. So the client who finds out his partner's cheated on him encounters the unpleasant. Okay? Then also, if you're at work, you mentioned work earlier. What happens when you get a bad performance review? Anyone ever get one of those? Huh? No one here, right? Got one? Well, then you were looking for being praised or complimented, huh? How about, do you ever have fights with your partner or your friends about that they don't, they're always criticizing? Why do you have to always criticize, when my driving? Why have you criticize my cooking? Isn't that funny? Agitates the mind, okay? Anyway, I'm going to move on, but why one of these shows, I was really thinking about depression and how depression can come from one of these. Right? Particularly, you look at the third one. Experience lack of fame, credibility, positive success. What happens when your business is not successful? I can't figure out why it's not working. So-and-so, she does the same thing I do. She's got clients coming in. She's got a waiting list. And then the next couple of days later, you run into, your other friend, and God, I'm so busy I got too many clients. Oh, I got the greatest client. They want to pay me double because they want twice as many hours. What happens so that's like, right? So there's something going on here in the mind. Now, whether you're not getting your pleasure. Oh, people get depressed because their partner won't sleep with them. Well, how about this one? After having a baby, it's kind of common that women don't feel so sexual, right? What happens to men? Do you know that men get depressed about that? Maybe you guys don't know. Who knows that? Yeah, it's kind of a problem, isn't it? For some people. Okay, just not getting pleasure, then depression, isn't it? Okay, isn't that weird? Why? Then about success, wealth and success. This is people start thinking about, and a lot of comparing, right? Okay. So just to think about that, if you meet people who are struggling with depression, it probably is related to one of these. Okay. So these create narratives, don't they? These create narratives. You see, one of us, we might experience one of these things, and we don't get depressed because we don't get a repetitive narrative going. In other words, we can have like Zoran Rinpoche said, right? He said, well, when you talk, you think. So, so something like this happens around success. Somehow your success is not coming. And some people get depressed. I think like if you're working in this valley, and people with a lot of startup companies, and then most of them don't succeed, and how many failures does an entrepreneur have before success? Anyone know? There's a kind of a number that's thrown out.
Around 19.
7.
Oh,
Really?
And then when you ask the entrepreneur how many failures he had before success, what does he say? Or she? 0, right. Why? It's the way they the narrative they have, the way they story it, the way they describe it. If you're not an entrepreneur and you try and you have it doesn't work, what happens? You get depressed. I'm so bad. I don't know business. I don't know, whatever. Interesting. So what's the difference between those two people? It's the narrative, the description, the label. Okay? Yeah, those entrepreneurs don't have any failures. They just, it didn't work out. I learned a lot from that. And from that, I'm going to build this other thing. So what are some narratives that follow from not getting what you want or getting what you don't want? Okay, this is going to be an exercise we're going to do. We can do from it. Well, maybe it doesn't resonate for you, but anyone have an example? Like, does this make sense? What are some of the narratives that follow from not getting what you want or getting what you don't want?
I'm a failure.
I'm a failure, exactly. What else? That's a pretty big one, huh?
I'm no good.
I'm no good. I'm no what?
Not smart.
Not smart enough. I'm not good. I'm a failure. Those are big. Those are pretty big ones in common, right?
Not pretty enough.
Not pretty enough. That's another one. I don't. I'm 40 years old, and I don't know if I'm ever going to find a partner. This could be man or woman, but in women's case, and it's like pretty depressing, isn't it? If you have friends, I mean, I do. Why? Because the narrative around that is what? What happens then? I'm not pretty enough. What's after I'm not pretty enough? Or I'm not attractive, right? What then? What happens then? I'll be lonely.
I'll be poor.
I'll be poor. I'll be unloved the rest of my life. Those are depressing narratives.
Die alone.
Die alone. Oh, God. So for the yogi, he wants to die alone, by the way. It's just how you label, right? Remember the quote from the guy last time? I hope sadness, he said, I hope it never fully leaves my life. That's perfect. So that's right. So when you have a narrative like that, and if someone doesn't stop you, right? If someone doesn't stop you, you just spiral downward. So the client whose wife cheated on him, you can see he's struggling with the narratives. I don't have to go into the details, but you know the kinds of narratives that come up, Terrible. I mean, it's like a hell realm. It's all just, right? It's nothing outside. It's all in your head. So we have to take charge of not getting depressed. And this is how we do it. These are the interventions, by the way. These are the interventions. I want to stress something. The interventions, because people want to know, what do I do when I'm depressed? Well, the intervention is don't get depressed. I know I don't mean that as a cop-out. That's the spiritual practitioner's approach. The spiritual practitioner has the same problems we all have, the same events. But as we train the mind, we become vigilant and aware. And we just get better and better about not going there. That's the practice. That's why we call it practice. There it is. I'll never be happy again. I'm unloved or unlovable. I have no friends. These are narratives of low self-worth. I'm hopeless. I'm unattractive. I'm not smart. You see, my business didn't succeed because I didn't go to college. Or I didn't do that MBA. There's people, I know people who are successful. I mean, successful in a really positive way. Created really meaningful programs and projects. And didn't go to college. And then they get down on themselves. I hope no one finds out. That's what they say. I hope no one finds out I didn't go to college. Have you seen that before? And I say to them, well, Steve Jobs didn't go to college. Yeah, well, they just don't even hear me when I say that. Because that narrative is so important, so fixed, okay? And that's a cultural thing too, by the way. Right. So this is how it arises. We have a perception. You hear some news, okay, or something. Like in the sense that the gentleman who's, this is not, who's found out his wife had cheated on him, or, you got turned down for a date, or you didn't get the job. Something happens. You perceive it. But the problem then is you label it. Now, when you label it, of course you're going to label it. That's what we do. You can't not label things. But depending on the label as being productive or unproductive, helpful or harmful, and we can't say delusional. You could be delusional in your label. Oh, everyone loves me. That's why no one's calling me. That doesn't fit with reality. But everybody hates me. That's why no one's calling me is also not true. Okay? So then there's a belief, which is the clinging to the label. Okay? And then the narratives start. Okay? So this is the way. They intervene at any level of these. Okay? Then we cling and grasp. And we won't let go. This is the practice. And you try to talk people to let go. Oh, I would let go, but he really shouldn't have done that. He's a jerk for doing that. Yeah. Okay, but that's not helpful. Okay, we talked about these last week, and I'm not going to spend time on them now, but I just wanted to review in case people weren't here last class. So when your afflictions arise, like depression, there's the imprints, like the person asked earlier in the hour. There's imprints, there's karmic imprints. If you don't have the imprints, it won't come up. It is possible for, we know, like some person's partner might cheat on them and they don't get all depressed. They're like, oh, good, relieved, right? I didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. So it gives me an excuse, right? The imprints are very different, aren't they? That's the only reason. Okay? So anyway, related object, the influence of helpful friends or companions, following wrong teachers and teachings, advice or instructions, habit, and mistaken conceptualizations or ideas. Real quickly. So the imprints stop. So then we're talking about intervention, okay? So we have the imprints, and people have asked us this week, the previous class, they accept that there's karma, there's imprints. Well, what do I do? Stop making them. Stop making them. Because you'll experience the results. And create positive imprints. Okay? That goes back to our Western modern narrative psychology. Okay? So if in the sense of depression, yes, you have the imprints for depression. Let's just say, I like your example. I'm 40 years old and, I'm never going to find a partner. That's can be depressing. That's kind of a common one, right? Loneliness and all that stuff. So you have to be vigilant. So if you start talking about, I can feel, I get you're never going to feel loved, and, maybe you just have to accept that you might not have a partner, and, you can join clubs and, help your loneliness and all that kind of stuff, right? But I'm not sure what would be, if that's positive, because that's sort of, again, isn't it? Identifying with, yes, it is a problem. Okay, some person could go, whatever it is, I'm 40, I may not have children, maybe that's a better way of saying children, but now I have the opportunity to do this and to do that, okay? And that's where we should, why spend time on the negative? It doesn't help. And your life, which is precious, just slips away. So when the deluded subject comes in relationship with the appropriate object, superstition explodes like an atomic bomb. That's Lama Yeshe's quote. That's why it's in quote. if you get depressed because when you smoke dope, don't smoke. Don't get in contact with smoking dope. If you get depressed because you hang around all these couples and you don't have anyone, then you might have to not be around those objects. It's not a solution, it's just a way of managing, right? If you have a problem with, you get this incredible craving for pastries. Nazia, do you go to Gail's Bakery?
Once in a while.
Okay. It's in Santa Cruz. If you're trying to break your attachment to carbs and sweets, don't go to Gail's Bakery. That's what it means by related object. Don't go around there. Influence of a helper, friends, or companions. I'm trying not to eat carbs. I don't want to go. I love those. What are they called? Downtowners at Gail's. You know, like the morning bun things. Then Nazia, hey, come on, let's go over to Gail's, and all right, she's an unhelpful friend. But I think about depression, even more serious things. We talked about that. If you get angry in certain, like with a political situation, maybe look at who you're having conversations with. If you're really trying to break out of that, I don't want to be angry at this situation. But then you call your friends, hey, did you see Rachel Maddow tonight? Maybe not, right? And your friend says, yeah, what do you think about that? I'm just saying, not wrong with that person. It's in your hands. If you find the political situation depressing, like many of us do, hopeless, don't call your friend that is watching that too and is, have a friendship, but just don't do that. Because in your attempt to break through, whether it's carbohydrates or whether it's loneliness, whatever it is. It's like if you're lonely and you hang around with other lonely people. Yeah? The narratives are all about, I'm generalizing, but those pathetic, poor me, but go to hang around people who like being alone because they get to meditate or they get to, they like being alone, whatever. You follow me, okay? Then following wrong teachers, spend time studying and reflecting upon proper instructions, helpful instructions. Not the ones that say, you're codependent. Let me tell you about your codependency. It happened because you probably came from an alcoholic family, and then your mom was still codependent on your dad, and it has a place, but it might not be the right thing at that time. Habit. So that means just stop. Try as much as to watch the habitual pattern of desiring that downtowner, or that habitual pattern of feeling sorry for yourself because your loneliness. And then mistaken conceptions or ideas. If I had a partner, I'd be really happy. That's the big one, huh? Then you're with a partner and you want to get divorced. Anyway, stand up to the narrative and create an alternative one. Okay, stand up to it and create an alternative one. The alternative one was, I really like being with people. I'm just not going to have expectations. Okay? Something like that. So the antidote is mind training. That is Buddhist therapy. Okay? So that's the difference in my early question, which people answered. What's the difference between a Western modern psychological approach to these problems and a Buddhist one? Buddhist psychology. The approach is unfortunately or fortunately in Buddhist psychology in general. Now it's changing a little bit how people are working with this stuff, but it has to do with long-term solution. It's not so good on feeling good. It should get better because that's, but when you really, if you go traditionally, like if you're feeling depressed, I was once feeling, I would call it depressed, and I went and saw one of my teachers, great Ruba Rinpoche, and all I remember him saying is, it won't last forever. And I said, well, how long? And he said to me, no one knows how deep that pool is. Now, you could find that very depressing, like hopeless. But I didn't. It was like I relaxed. Okay, it might be here for a while, Okay? No one knows how deep that pool is, so relax. It's like if you're going through financial problems. We think the answer to financial problems is what? Better business, better handling your finances, or cut back. I mean, those things are good. I'm not discounting that. But when we really look at things so we get depressed about our finances, or lack thereof. Okay, then you think, well, no one knows how deep that pool is. You don't really know which means you don't know how long those imprints are going to. And you can do some things. We're not going to talk about the little things you can do, but we're talking about the big thing, which is the depression around it. Right? It's about a choice. And when we have a belief, and many different things can affect our choice. And one thing is, because we've talked about tonight, is this idea of karma, mental imprints. So you don't know how deep that pool is, right? So you better relax. Maybe your financial problems, that pool is 5 years deep, 10 years deep. Don't know. So you're going to stay depressed? No, you're going to go, okay, how do I be happy? I mean, that's what you'd have to do. I remember someone, because I used to do lots of, not lots, but frequently, Lama Yeshe's letters. As his like secretary when he was at Kopan and stuff like that, as attendant, so to speak. Not as attendant, more like his secretary. And someone had been talking to him and was really quite tearful because she really irritated people. There's people like that. And she just couldn't see it. She didn't know what to do. She knew that this happened, but she didn't get it, which is not surprising, right? And I've known her for a long time, and I can attest that you have to sort of have some preparation to be with her, because if you're not, for many people, she has that effect on them. And Lama Yeshe really gave interesting advice. I didn't hear all the advice, but I heard one thing he told her. I mean, I asked her. I didn't hear. I asked her what was the advice Lama gave, and she only told me this one thing. He said, sometimes we're born with qualities that we just can't change in our life. That was relieving to her. Now, as a Buddhist who thinks about enlightenment, we know anything can be changed. But it's almost like if she becomes enlightened or very advanced, maybe she would still have that quality of irritating people, but it wouldn't be an issue for her. Right? Just like, I believe there's certain beings that are enlightened beings, or very advanced, but they still have like a big stomach, or they have bushy eyebrows, or, you know what I mean? There's something, they still have qualities. And they have personalities too that are different. His Holiness Dalai Lama seems to have a different personality than Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe. I believe all of them are very advanced. In fact, every one of those beings have very different personalities. Very different. Okay, so I think that it's just their personalities become like enlightened personalities. Enlightened irritation. Annoyance. Okay, so we'll just talk more definitively. Techniques to counter out depression, non-Buddhists and Buddhists alike. This I got a lot from His Holiness Dalai Lama. Reflect that while we may not feel love, His Holiness talking about, we talked about this last time, I think, that it seems there's a connection between depression and not feeling loved, particularly as a child, and not feeling affection. This Holiness was talking about, the conversations he had with different psychologists and professionals. Reflect that while we may not feel love and affection at the present time, we have received much caring and warmth from others since we were born. So you see, what happens with depression is we get very narrow, right? You know, you're having problems at work. You know, it seems that people have turned on you. Happens. You feel that way. I'm speaking from my client's point of view too. And then the person, this one, gets very depressed about it. Now, I didn't suggest this to her, but, you know, basically you'd say she feels unloved. Kind of a hostile environment. So she's focusing too much on these particular people's love for her and affection. Whether they are or not, I'm not going to judge. You know, it's not the point right at the moment saying, you know, she's probably exaggerating it, right? She sees everything that way. But that's not the point. Because she's feeling depressed, so you see things negatively. But in this context, it's really about expanding, because she feels unloved, so she's depressed. So this is where we're talking about, you know, the second one. Sometimes we're blind to the kindness around us. She has a loving relationship. She has other friends. And then there's the thing about, you know, sometimes you're just dissatisfied with the level of affection and love, and you want more or better. Okay, so that's when we reflect on how fortunate we are to have loving people around us. And, you know, for most people, of course there's cases where they're just very isolated, you know, but most people have had affection, love, and warmth in their life. And they can reflect on that, you know, just to get you out of that poor me, the victimization. That is a depressing place to be. Victims are depressed. That's the nature of being a victim. Or angry. This is another reflection. So, and you know, someday we could spend more time on these, and I actually do as a meditation in here, you know. So this reflection for non-Buddhists was like, cultivate contentment with the affection and kindness we have received. I underline contentment because that's what's missing. You want more of it. Right? It's not enough. There's a couple I saw for quite a while, and they really were kind of in battle. Long time. And for the gentleman, if he had just removed this one thing, this concept he had, which was that she doesn't love me enough. I asked what he meant. You know, she's not affectionate. I'd like to get kissed sometimes. I'd like to get, you know, her just to be home and keep the house clean. That means a lot to me. That means she's, you know, loves me. You know, it was more sexual, more intimate. He didn't have contentment. And they were married a long time. So some people would say, no, you know, he shouldn't be content. He's giving in. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a healthy state of mind, right? So that's not a healthy state of mind. You don't love me enough. You don't love me enough. You don't love me the way I want you to love me. You don't love me the way I want you to love me. You don't love me. And then you go to therapy, and then you start making compromises. Okay, we'll have sex twice a week. And then make dinner 4 nights. And then you make sure you give me a hug once a day. Sounds like a plan, is that what you said? Yeah. Well, I think there's a place for that kind of work. It's not it's just, I'm too arrogant, I think. I can't spend my time doing that anymore. It's not because the problem is, right? The problem is an attitude. It's a belief. And I probably not very helpful to that person because I don't support that. It's very hard for me. And I've done it for years, and I really did it for years, and now I think they can see someone else and do that work, That's just the fact, It's not that there's anything wrong with it. I want people to be, so I want him to be happy and content. And the way to be happy and content is start looking at his expectations, right? Expectations are what make us discontent, I think. You can think about that. Urs, before you retire, you have to fix this. And rejoice in it. So it's not just a matter of content, it's rejoicing. And I think this is another quality of why we have more depression. I think we have more depression in our culture than traditional cultures. And the reason is we don't really appreciate and rejoice in what we have. And we have so much. We have this, it's kind of, we've been recruited into thinking you can have more and more. And that's what happiness is. So, give me more love and give me more affection and give me, as opposed to just backing off. And it's really a pretty amazing exercise when you rejoice in what you have. You can if you look for negativity, you find lots of it. So then he needs a hug twice a day. Right? That's what happens, isn't it? When you have fixed it. And then sex 3 times a week. Then what was the other thing they were doing? Cleaning the house. Cooking dinner 4 times. Okay, and on the 5th time, you don't have to cook it, but we have to have a date. Let's have date night. Where does it end? If the mind is discontent, it doesn't end, right? And then it's like, well, the way you gave me the hug, it's like you didn't really mean it. Yeah. And then we don't have to talk about sex, but same thing, right? It's the same, right? I'd like to talk about it because we could look at some funny, it's kind of so amazing. Why is sex so important in this culture? It's really amazing. So then it's about also seeing the positive effects in our life of the affection and kindness we have received. From the time we were born until now, all of our happiness has depended on the kindness of others. We don't think like that. What you do say is, my mother was, she was cold. She didn't give me much love. My dad, I tried to talk to him, but he was so involved in his business. This is the narrative now, right? Bad parenting. And I have questions, so I'm curious. Has that produced a better world or not? Now, it's not to say that you discount what happened. You can't discount it, but it's the emphasis on it. It's the focus on it. I've never heard anything in any media, any psychology magazines or books or Dr. Phil or anybody say, that happened, but wow, your parents so kind to you. People say, well, no, he abused me, he used to beat me. Yeah, but can you imagine how kind they were? And how would you mean kind? They say like this, right? And they don't even realize, what, you don't think having this body is a precious thing? You don't think that they gave up sleep? At least they gave up sleep for the first couple years. They went and bought food. They didn't have to. You were helpless. Like, what did they say in the law? You were like a worm. No, you had totally dependent. You didn't die. They didn't kill you. But everything, every pleasure, every happiness that you have, you met a beautiful partner, you have decent, whatever. You live in a good country, at least, whatever, isn't that due to the kindness of the parents? And people always say, yeah, but they didn't mean to. It doesn't matter. You're indebted to them. Now, some people, okay, it does happen. Really, 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 really bad parents. It does happen. That's always the thing. But I think if we look at the statistics, it's not going to be very high. That they're the ones that are, really unworthy of seen as kind. I think it's a very small minority. And if you do have that, which you could have, there was someone else in your life that did show you. Now, I'm not talking, okay, and you can look at people, yeah, but what about Son of Sam? His parents were, or Jeffrey Dahmer, or of course there's extreme examples. But just as regular people, not to have anger, Anyway, it's interesting. Our culture and familial training has made us focus on what we have not received. We have a negative bias, and this negative bias is a pretty big topic these days, that we are born. But I don't know, I actually think it's culturally reinforced anyway. We tend to notice much more negative than the positive. And so I think why Buddhist psychology talks about this appreciation, rejoicing, seeing the kindness of the parents, is to counter that. I believe that that's a misconception. That's a mental condition that does keep us trapped. And I think it's valid that we're negative bias. It's kind of annoying because we see, we're just like, we're critical. And some people are more than others. It's not like, but if something happens, like if you get a bad grade, in class or something, and even though you had many good grades, that bad grade has a much, much more profound effect on your mood than the good grades. That's kind of that's why we're negative bias. So the negative is given over the accentuated. So again, non-Buddhists, this is about depression, is look around at others. So this is my advice, and people who are watching or, involved or will watch this, who don't have a particular affinity to Buddhist thought, they're interested, that's why they're watching. But these are just they're powerful therapeutic techniques. Is to look around at others, and when we look at the difficulty others are in, we all know that has a profound effect on us. And the problem with depression is it tells you don't do that. So you have to be a little bit more vigilant. And then you say, no, I don't want to. I don't care about those other people. Well, then you have to ask yourself, do you care about your happiness? Do you want to stay in depression or not? You have to ask people. I think some people are not committed to getting out of it. It's kind of like a habit. I mean, ultimately, yes, they want to be out of it. But it's almost like, people who won't work for money, to make wealth, but they go buy lottery tickets. It's the same thing. You don't want to be, you're depressed. We now know it's due to karmic imprints, mental imprints. God is not going to get rid of your depression. Buddha is not going to get rid of your depression. Your therapist is not going to get rid of your depression. No one can get rid of your depression but you. So you want to do it? I don't know. That's what depression does too. It just robs you of your enthusiasm, right? It's hard. And I don't know. Well, what if you don't have to be that way? Then would you rather be depressed? No, I'd rather be not depressed. Okay. Here's how you do it. And they say, I can't do it. But you know what? With depressed people, eventually, not all, but the ones like not the deep depression, they eventually do it. They get tired of it. So sometimes, you have to go at a pace. I realize that you can't do it too early. Because not sick of it yet. It's like there's some payoff for them, right? But after a while, oh my God, it's just too painful. And then the medications don't work, by the way. They take the edge off. Alcohol doesn't work. People go down and they don't stop, of course, and then we know we have a big problem. But if someone, at the point where they really ask, okay, I'm tired of this, I'm asking for help, this is what you tell them. Let's look at the world. What is the predicament? How would you like to be in Syria right now? How would you like to, take them, take them to Kaiser, take them to the oncology ward for the children? And how would you like to be these parents? You can find many, 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 many examples, right? It doesn't mean, yeah. I wonder about your friend, whose son has the addiction. I wonder, when you see him, do you see him the same way that she sees him? Do you know him?
You mean as hopeless? I know that family.
Yeah. So that family, when you see him, what's he like to you?
He is definitely a very hopeless place, right?
He's in a hopeless place. He feels hopeless.
He's degraded.
Yeah. Degraded.
Yeah. For many years. I mean, for 6 years.
6 years. How old is he?
40.
Roughly?
40.
Oh, that's nothing. 6 years. Not nothing, but I had a brother-in-law who was an addict for 40 years.
No,
30
he's been an addict since 20s,
Uh-huh.
20s, but
It's tough.
yeah, but for 6 years not working,
Oh,
not
yeah.
living in a room, just not leaving the room basically.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard. So depression's taking over.
Yeah,
He has no separation from depression. He needs separation.
anxiety too.
Anxiety too. Yeah. So the point was he doesn't even leave in his room much. But you see, the only thing you can do. Well, first of all, you have to not be hopeless. That's pretty tough, right? And then you have to work slowly. Really, you have to be positive. You have to be hopeful. And the hopefulness you can find because if you read stories of other addicts, people get out of it. It's not. I'm not saying it's easy. It's one of the toughest ones. But people do become recovering addicts. So it's like, how do we do that? And spending a lot of time with those people who have the positive, not the problem-saturated view, but the solution-saturated view. You have to hang around with people who believe in the solution, believe in the solution, okay? Everyone suffers in one way or another. Our hearts will open and the strength of our love and compassion for others will increase. Okay. Now I'll go to a few Buddhist things. Okay? Buddhist therapy, this is just a few ideas I had. So you balance the mind through mindfulness. That's one therapeutic approach. Or you become familiar with depression and the depressed. What does that mean? Become familiar with the depression and the depressed. You become familiar with the depression is, you research. And the depressed is either yourself, so become familiar with yourself. The identity of depression, of the depressed person. Or the identity of the person who you're thinking about, working with, talking to. Then there's thought transformation. There's analytical meditation. There's emptiness meditation. These are all not mutually exclusive, by the way. They're all inclusive, they're all related. Okay? Someone asked, so, people aren't going to like this. Self-cherishing, let's turn it around. Depression is the epitome of self-cherishing. People go, that's not very nice. Right? But if you interview depression, what do you hear? I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that. She treated me this way, he treated me that way. I'm not getting enough, I don't have enough money, I'm going to go poor, I'm going to go bankrupt, I'm not feeling any love, I'm not feeling any affection. He doesn't touch me anymore. My kids are rude to me. They treat me like crap. They're so entitled. People at work are so rude. No one likes me. I mean, if you listen on and on, I'm not saying it's easy. But if you look at it, what's the common denominator? Yeah. I want this, I want that. I want him to treat me with more respect. I want him to treat me with more affection. I want her to cook me dinner. I want, I don't want to have a wife that cheats on me. None of that's easy. The conditions are all hard, right? But if you took out that I, that strong sense of I, all those conditions would have less effect, right? And the other thing is, because of that karmic thing, and remember other things, it's very hard to change conditions. So your wife cheats on you, so leave her. Might be the best thing to do. I'm not saying, sometimes we have to manipulate, and we have to move conditions around. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes that's the best we can do. But we also know that, did you get rid of the cause of the depression? Was she the cause of it? Like I said, sometimes you need conditions. So if you're in an alcoholic relationship and he beats you, or she beats you, and you're unhappy, your unhappiness is about you, but you might need to get out of there because it's too strong of an environment. But that's what I said to you about a healthy relationship. A healthy person goes, this situation is due to my causes. I realize, because I'm who I am in my universe, for so many lifetimes, I ended up here with this abusive guy, this mean guy, whatever. I get that. And I can't handle it. So I'm getting the hell out of here. That's okay. Of course. That's just practical. But what adds the extra spice to that is, I created this. Kind of, right? It's really too bad. How did I do that? You reflect like that. Okay, so that's a little different than saying that's the solution to my unhappiness in this abusive relationship. The solution is getting out of this abusive relationship. Okay, it doesn't mean you necessarily change any karma, any imprints, and any identity about yourself, because ultimately it also has to do with your own self-identity. But doesn't mean you don't get the heck out of there. Okay, see, they're different, right? Okay, it's about accountability. This is Buddhist accountability. Not if you say this to regular clients, it's not fair. It's almost unethical. Yeah, just stay with him because you have this karma to work out. So I want to make clear that I'm not. It's not like that. You can't. I often use the example of my mother, who's now it's not really relevant, but when my dad died, then she was very tormented. So was I going to go tell her, well, Mom, see, it's all about your attachment to her, and you shouldn't have become so attached. So because you're attached to her, that's why, having all these, you can't say that. You go and sit with her and hold her hand and tell her it's hard, and, that the good things that therapists learn, that I learned from becoming a therapist. I didn't know how to do that stuff. So it's very useful. But we have to meet people at their level. I would say, I've changed that. Don't meet them at their level. Meet them just a little bit above. Okay? The strongest support for depression is one's own self-valuing. We become obsessed with our own problems and our happiness. But in a way, that only brings us misery. So it's this obsession. I have to find a partner. I have to have a baby. My biological clock is ticking. I have to do this. You're right? We become obsessed. I got to get a better job. Some people say, "Oh, I'm 30 and I still haven't found my career." Have you heard that one before? Yeah. And we become obsessed. And what happens? It's becomes a big problem. And it's all concept. Sure, you haven't found a job yet, but whatever. Okay? So we have to be careful. I'm speeding up because I want to finish all these. So as a Buddhist, these can be meditations. Maybe someday we'll do them. You develop a sense of our own potential. This is from His Holiness Dalai Lama. With depression, he was specifically talking about depression. You develop a sense of our own potential. Our Buddha nature is always there. See, that's the difference between ordinary therapy and Buddhist therapy. The foundation of all Buddhist psychology and all Buddhist therapeutic techniques is Buddha nature. Okay? And that the goal is, to awaken the Buddha nature within us. Okay? That's the therapy. And so guess what? It might not feel too good today when you do it. It might not get rid of the depression, right? Whereas regular therapy probably has some, may be more effective short term. May or may not, but it may be, right? Or like medication takes the edge off. Whereas Buddhist therapy might not take that edge off right away. Rupa Rinpoche didn't take the edge off for me. No one knows how deep that pool is. If he was nice, he would have said, "Oh, it's okay, Karuna. Just, you'll be okay. And, I know it hurts. I know you're sad." Those things help, right? Empathy. But he didn't do that. Because he was focusing on Buddha nature. Okay. Oh, they just taught natural Buddha nature is the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind. I'm not going to go into this. We don't have much time. So, in the reflection, so this is what it leads to. You reflect on that there's no difference between Buddha and us. The only difference is in the Buddha's actualized the Buddha nature. In us, it's just not actualized. But there's no difference. Buddha wasn't born a Buddha. Buddha wasn't born a God. Buddha was just like us, and we will be Buddha too. It's a process. It's developmental. Okay. Then you can go on the reflection of the nature of cyclic existence, and this is interesting. You don't have you lost your job. That's part of cyclic existence, right? Impermanence. Your partner cheated on you. That's the nature of cyclic existence. What do you expect? People have pleasure. They're completely driven by desire. They can't control themselves. You think that this absolutely wouldn't happen? But he promised. We took vows. Taking a vow doesn't stop it, does it? It's taking a vow not to follow pleasure that stops it. Right? Otherwise, there'd be no 50% divorce rate in our country. I took the vow of marriage. Well, So it's not. It's like this is the nature of cyclic existence. People's minds are unsteady. Right? They're not reliable because of the afflictions. Okay? People, all of it, nature of cyclic existence is being under the control of afflictions and karma, which means cause and effect. Problems are endless. Expect and accept them. Accept that problems are endless. You can change some problems, so it doesn't mean just accept that, the guy over there is beating up that kid. It's a problem. It's something that you can do something about. But there has to be some kind of, we have to expect, we don't know what's coming next, do we? I don't know if in the next few moments I'm going to get criticized. Right? I don't know in the next few moments there will be, I got zillions of cells in my body and all that, just one has to go awry, right? I don't know that. I don't know if I'm going to die on Highway 17 tonight. I don't know. That doesn't mean you get depressed. It just is. So you accept that this nature is really problematic. It's full of problems because what it means when the Buddha taught the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. One way you can say yes, right now, this is suffering, and that takes some meditation to figure out what he meant because he did mean that. But another way of saying it is we have no protection from problems. Unless we practice, normally, there's no protection from problems. There's zero. We can develop the protection. But just in general, for the world, how can we say there's not going to be problems? Who would have expected, I mean, honestly, did anyone expect that our political situation would be like this 2 years ago? I would have never thought so. Someone said to me, excuse me, I don't want to offend the other side, but someone said to me that it's actually, and I believe this, it's a coup. It's a conservative right-wing coup. I went, whoa. And because 2 years ago, if you said, America's immune to coups, right? I would, who would have thought? Maybe again, and I'm not saying this situation, but maybe 5-10 years from now it's going to be worse for some other thing you would never thought would have happened. We don't know. What a bunch of lies we got tricked by. Oh, America can't have a coup. We were duped. Of course it could. It's the nature of the world. Cyclic existence. Right? Unpredictable. We're dumb thinking, oh, it's going to continue. It's impermanent. I was really dumb. It's like, why would you be surprised that this is going on? It's not a surprise. It's the nature of the world, of life. And I'm depressed about it. Okay, and there's one or two more. Oh, Lama said to me once, it says, when Lama Yeshe is depressed, what does he do? You're going, he's never depressed. Well, that's why I put it in quotes, okay? One day at Kopan, it was a rough life. I mean, it was the most perfect, beautiful life. I was so fortunate. There were hard things about it. This was third world. This was Nepal with basically no electricity, no telephones. Food was terrible. Very poor conditions. We ran out of money every monsoon time and start running out of food, and I get lonely, and all those things, right? I think I had kind of a depressed style. He used to always make fun of me about being depressed in front of other people, hundreds of people sometimes. That won't get rid of your depression. You either go really into it or you get out of it. One time, this is just personal. So one time, he used to pick on me a lot. I mean, I don't know. It's something. I feel very fortunate, but it was hard, Someone's mean to you. But no one loved me more than he did. And when he was mean, I thought, this is unbelievable that he loves me, if you're really going to help someone, sometimes you might need to be mean. But we can't do it, right? Because we'll get angry or attachment. So it may be like a mom who spontaneously grabs her kid from running across the street. That kind of meanness, that's love, right? So it was maybe like, so one time, this has nothing to do with anything, by the way. So one time, we're in the court. I used to sometimes have to eat our lunch and sit in the court, not the court, in front of the office, this kind of courtyard. And there were like several of us eating there, just on our lap, how you would eat this outside. And Lama Yeshe came down from the temple or his room, came down, and as you do, you stand up, as a courtesy. So we'll all stand up, and he walks into kind of the middle of all of us, and people are sitting, sort of scattered here and there, kind of, like in this, like people were over there and over there, and he comes right in the middle, and he said, "Everyone, look at me, look at me." He was very much of a showman. And he put they called it Zen, this shawl that he put his Zen over his head, and he sort of moping around like this. And he says, "Everyone, look at me, look at me. This is Karuna." Look, this is Karuna. And he's like moping, and everyone's laughing, like that. You got to develop. I didn't have a very healthy ego, because I was like, did it again. I get depressed for a few more days. Everyone, look at me, look at me. But I guess that's what you have to do. I don't want to do that to my clients, but. So then one day it was late at night, and he was in the kitchen. I don't know what time of day it was. He was in the kitchen, which sometimes I go in the kitchen just to, and this kitchen is wood fires. I mean, with big brick ovens and, cooking on wood for 100, 200 people. It was very, smoke is everywhere. So I go, and I guess he saw me again. I was kind of depressed, I can't remember what happened. And he said to me, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, okay, sometimes good, sometimes bad, something like that." And he said, "When I get depressed, I come in to this kitchen and I just sit with my boys." Meaning the monks. Because they'd be working, the monks have to work in there, or the dining room was right there. And I just come and I sit with my boys. What did he mean? I did that a lot, by the way. I would just go into the kitchen, and generally you couldn't do that because we had also, visitors, Western visitors, but I worked there. So I go, what he meant, I realized what he meant years. It takes you out of yourself. Socialize. And their vibration was very sweet, and they're kids. They're kids' vibration. So if you do that, I was thinking, depressed people should just go work in a daycare or preschool or elementary school, or hang around. It takes you out of yourself. Okay, so it's 9:00. Urs, you got to fix this. Okay, so there's a few other reflections real quick. Too much focus on me. So you spend your time looking around at others. Everyone suffers one way or another. Reflect deeply on this. Our hearts will open. The strength of our love and compassion for others will increase. This is a direct antidote to depression, by the way. Get out of yourself. Get into others. Reflection 4, transformative experience. So this is a more advanced. So people, what you do is you take on the depression. You actually kind of hang out with it. You engage with it. And then you can even think, sometimes I found it helpful to think, this depression is my teacher. And you just say, what are you teaching me? I'm going to stop fighting you. I'm going to stop arguing with you. Stop complaining that you're in my world. Stop crying and moping. And just be with it. And it's hard to convince regular people to do this. What happens to it, by the way, when you do that? It goes away. Remember the Wizard of Oz? Big voice. Right? Remember? All the Oz, he's commanding. Everyone's intimidated. Everyone's coming to him like he's the big guru, God, whatever. They're coming all over and then who discovered what he really was? Huh? Toto, yeah. The dog. All this. The dog goes by. Mary pulls the curtain away, and this little guy, his feet don't even reach the ground. He's shouting into that megaphone. That's like depression. Just stop listening, believing its messages, and just hang out with it and see what it's really about. And then you can expand it. When you get better, you get into other people's depression. Okay? Is there a question? Or no. Okay, so that transforms one's mind and being into, empathy and compassion. This is what you'll get from it. Happiness. But particularly because you develop empathy and compassion. We can't develop empathy and compassion if you don't feel depression and anger and suffering. How can you develop empathy? It's by getting in touch with your own that you get in touch with others. No other way, I don't think. Tolerance, contentment, balance, and well-being. Then the last thing I wanted, because there was a person asked, what did I mean about, remember, Margaret, the independent or something?
Something exists. What does it mean, existing from it?
What does it mean, existing from its own side? So of course, that's a huge topic. That's the central topic to all Buddhist psychology and all Buddhist philosophy. So I want to say that. But that is also what's so interesting. Why is it central? It is what makes Buddhism Buddhism. And all problems, solution, the solution to all problems is that thing. When we use, what did I mean by what? Independent existence? Or what was the question here? Which aspect?
Existing from their own side.
Existing from their own side. So So just bear with me. I'll try and do a 2-minute teaching on emptiness. So depression, I had it here too, that's why. So with depression, when you analyze, and we have to analyze, depression appears to exist from its own side. Margaret appears to exist from her own side. Urs appears to exist from his own side. This computer appears to exist from its own side. The microphone, the cars, Highway 17, your partner who cheated on you, your anger. So not just external things, everything external appears to exist from its own side. And what's really weird is everything internal appears to exist from its own side. Meaning your anger, your attraction to, the attracted mind, and your depression, amongst all the other emotions. So depression is just, it's a mental state, and it appears to exist separate out there by itself. And now intellectually people go, well, I know it doesn't. I'm not talking about intellectually. The human condition, our whole problem is that we spontaneously, instinctively, habitually, uncontrollably go through each instant seeing things existing from their own side, and they don't. This is the central theme of Buddhist thought. Nothing exists from its own side. Another way of saying, we think things exist independently. Now just do the experiment. It could be anything. My voice or me sitting up here, it looks like I'm here independently. And you look independent to me, right? Now, if that's not true, what is true? Well, then things either don't exist at all. Well, we can't say that. Something's going on here, right? So things do exist. So how do they exist? If they don't exist independently, and they do exist, how? Dependently. So this takes a lot of work. So now, depression exists, because it looks to exist independently, it has power over us. Okay? But it's not. It's a dependent thing. Just like a building is dependent upon the bricks and the mortar and the cement and the wood and electricity, electrical wiring and the rebar and all these things. We see it, it's so amazing. We see a building as existing independently on its own. That's a building. But when you take it apart, just like if you took all the parts of it and put it in a pile, you wouldn't say that's a building, right? Right? But that's all it is. It's just configured a certain way, and we label it building. So depression's the same way. It's just configured. And when you look to find how it's configured, it's a construction. It's merely constructed. So you have to deconstruct it. So the first thing in this process, and this is a very long, those of you who study this know that this is not like you don't just hear it once, and there's a lot of steps to it, this process, right? A lot of analysis and a lot of study and a lot, because I'm giving the Reader's Digest version, actually even simpler than that. So, but one thing I will suggest for people, if they want to, just spend time looking at how your mind sees depression as if it exists like a big black thing there, or whatever. It doesn't exist that way because it's dependent upon you perceiving it. If you're not perceiving it, it doesn't exist. It's also dependent on a sense of self, right? I'm depressed. If it's independent, then you can't feel depressed. It's separate from you. Something independent is independent. So why are you depressed? Oh, I see. Well, then what is it? It's the the sense of self's interaction, seeing that in a way that doesn't exist. When we do that, the depression totally, absolutely, 100% will disappear forever. You might have to do it a few times. I went way over time, but I had to explain it, didn't I? Yeah. I mean, that's so short. It's hard to do it short, but that's like an examination for me. Okay, so I think that's it. I think we'll do something different next time. Not sure what. January 11th. I'm here, yeah. January 11th. So I'm not sure what we're going to do yet. If people have strong feelings or really strong requests, please send them to say a few. Yeah.
Top interests seem to be on regret,
laziness,
distraction, and anxiety.
We did anxiety, but that's always a good one. So say them again. Regret, laziness, distraction,
and people anxiety. Also,
relationships. So we got 5 there. How will we choose one?
People have
Preferences? Huh? Regret. That's come up a lot. And we can do regret. I got to figure out what that means. What people... Well, I got to figure out what people... What's it mean? What would you like?
My issue with regret is I have to be careful not to go to guilt.
Regret versus guilt. Okay.
So I mean, for me, it's very easy to regret and then feel guilty about the things I regret.
Okay.
And, then I get depressed about being guilty about regretting. And, it's just cyclical.
Okay. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, I feel the same way as that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll figure something out. It's a good one. I like having these topics that they're not cookie cutter ones. I mean, you could say emptiness, or you could say compassion, or those 8 pursuits, or something. Something easy. But it's better to be challenged. Okay, we'll try and do that. Okay.
So frustration from regret, for wasted time, wasted efforts.
Oh yeah.
Wasted money.
Okay.
A person online asked again for relationships.
Yeah, relationships is a good one. I will do relationships. Why don't we try to do regret next time, and then relationships after? And relationships might take a couple sessions. I may regret will too, but I have to think about it. Yeah. Okay, I'll try my best. Okay. So let's just conclude, and thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for helping me so much. And now you just dedicate the energy as if we made a bunch of money. And people dedicate their earnings to different things. They put it in retirement, or they put it into a car, or get a new sofa. So this mental energy that we've expended but created, I think this time I'm going to suggest just dedicating it to all the people on this planet. You can even extend it to all the creatures, all living beings. Let's just, though, dedicate that that it seeps into the minds of every being and then never, ever experience depression again. We'll give it away this time. We don't need it. They need it. They have no key. And then one last thing is just to have a thought that all the helpers in the world, the true helpers, our own teachers, His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and then of course teachers from other traditions, other religions, they all have long, healthy lives, and that anything they're trying to achieve is achieved without any obstacle at all. No hindrance. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you. See you January 11th. If you come. And if I come. It's a dependent arise, see? Dependent, isn't it?